Hello, welcome to this episode of The Living Process. My name is Greg Madison, and this time my guest is João da Fonseca. João's from Lisbon, and I had the pleasure of first meeting him when he was in his the last stages of his training as an existential psychotherapist, and I went to offer his class some introduction into focusing and experiential psychotherapy. And he, along with some of his classmates, became so interested in focusing that I ended up going back, along with a couple of other colleagues, to offer a 2-year certification training. And João was one of the few people that really followed through on focusing and became very engaged in the international community and made a lot of connections with other teachers and coordinators, and himself has become a coordinator for the International Focusing Institute. In this episode, we talk a little bit about Joao's sort of general context, but mostly we talk about his most recent passion, which is psychedelic-assisted therapy, and how that has influenced his view of therapy and of focusing. And he also gives us a really nice sort of outline of the different substances that are used in those forms of therapy and how they have different kinds of impacts. My impression at the end of the conversation was that we opened up a lot of different areas, all of which really deserve more time. So we may need to have a follow-up, but I'd be interested in any comments you have if there's particular aspects of psychedelic assisted therapy and focusing that you would like us to explore further. So here's our conversation, The Living Process, and João da Fonseca. So I want to welcome you, João, to The Living Process. Looking forward to talking to you about, but first of all, like with everybody, I'm curious if you want to tell your story of how you got into focusing or into Gendlin's work, sort of how you came upon it.
That's pretty easy because the main cause is right in front of me. It's materialized, so there's not too much abstractions or narratives. So I have to thank you, of course, Greg. And I didn't, I was doing a training in existential psychotherapy. I went there after my phase on transpersonal training also, which was beautiful and still present in my life right now. But in terms of people being more into connection to the transpersonal or modified states of consciousness, it was hard to find them. So it's kind of hard to um, uh, um, have the job in the clinical practice in a way. So I said, well, we gotta find out something that more concrete, more into our existential realm. So I went to that training and I think it was in the probably the third year of our training where we met you and you came out with the work of Jenglin and the experiential process and theoretically it was amazing to be open to that, but then the major and the nuclear uh, um, wave that opened up everything was how you presented ourselves, how you presented yourself, and how focusing was in our body, everything that we do, and I was almost like thinking, oh, well, how could I not heard about this before?
Mhm.
Where was this hidden in a way?
Yeah.
And from there, everything started. This deeply connection to yourself, what you're really feeling outside all these narratives and all this hypervigilance, and even the effect of being a psychologist and a psychotherapist at the same time, uh, so locked in that conceptual world in a way, and the body is not there. So you just this was a rebirth in
Mm.
a way of presence of finding my own inner GPS, and then we were all moved, of course, and the partnerships then came out, and then after that we asked you, begged you to have a course for a group here with us, um, and there it started everything. Then I started my connection with uh, the TIFI,
Mm.
um, and tried to make some translations also, and going more deeply into Jensen's work, and then I even had this invitation with a little scholarship to go to Switzerland to the Congress, and there was also a pivotal moment because I could live for 1 week with focusing world people
Mhm.
and relations and interactions, and that was like an utopia in a way. I had to come back to the world, and afterwards it was hard.
Yeah, those conferences are really a special atmosphere. And the training, I just want to mention, it was also with Nicoletta and Astrid. So it was the three of us kind of worked together with you. I remember those days. Very enjoyable. I just want to,
Absolutely, Greg. And then just like, of course, Nicoletta and Astrid and their other realms and doors that they gave to us.
yeah.
So yeah.
So yes, I know about how you came into focusing, so it's kind of a slightly trick question in this case.
It was
But
needed. It was needed.
yeah, but it's interesting to me because a lot of people that learn focusing kind of learn it and then disappear. They go back into whatever world they were in, maybe continue to practice it or integrate it into their work or their lives, but they don't make the connection to the international focusing community. But you did do that, and I'm curious if you have any insight into what makes the difference? What made you actually kind of embrace the world of focusing as much as you have? Like you've become better known internationally, and I've seen that you've been you know working with other teachers and stuff. So somehow you've really gotten into it. I'm curious why you and not some of your colleagues that took the same training.
Yeah, the what I have heard from them in a way, it's just precisely what you described. They picked up something really valuable, and they love focusing. It's incredibly meaningful for them the way they're listening to people, not only in work but outside. It just it it stood with them. But they got back to their own lives, and I guess the meetings with all of us together didn't came through. It just lasted for maybe 5 years after we were all trained,
Okay.
um, and something got a little bit dispersed on that. Then it opened up. I remember some other people opening up to things like somatic experiencing, uh, internal family systems, almost like following the same river. But it kind of sounded like it was a main door that opened to other branches of experiential work. In my case, I mean, that hit me so hard at my core. It was everything because I took on a path where it was first on transpersonal psychology, then existential therapy, and then focusing kind of and between that, I was searching for other ways of being with people and exploring our own healing. Um, but it got to a point where there's too many files opened, and focusing brought this body, and that never left. So it was an inside movement. The more I got into connection with people and with Tiffy and all the different varieties where this can be applied, the more I got in contact with me. And through all these years, I maybe missed like 1 or 2 weeks without doing a focusing partnership, for example, different ones. So I've been talking to the experiential gym, and I cannot be too much time apart from it.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess here we didn't agglomerate it as a group somehow. I don't really know um, what kind of happened, but I I then became a coordinator. It has been a little bit difficult to find my uh, trainings, but been working more in other areas as much as I can help with
Yeah.
translations and being part of focusing highlights or
Yeah.
home groups. That's where it's been happening in a way. So
So I
yeah.
know that um, you have your own clinical practice and that you do offer trainings. Um, but it's interesting to me that it's like as the time after the training, eventually the group you trained with kind of dispersed a little bit and didn't stay together as a focusing training group or whatever. That somehow that's the thing that sort of people get a little bit potentially isolated in their focusing or something, or maybe they continue a partnership, but the rest of us in the focusing community never hear about them again. So
Mm.
the world could be littered with all of these focusing people that we know nothing about, uh,
Yeah.
lost contact with. But anyway, the thing I really want to ask you about is I know that the other part of your work at the moment is in, and I don't know how you would say it, psychedelics?
Yeah, psychedelic-assisted therapy.
Okay. So I'm very curious about that and about how you, if you do, integrate focusing into that. And I'm also curious about the different kinds of psychedelics that are being used, like the ones that I'm familiar with, psilocybin,
Yeah.
LSD, MDMA, ketamine. So I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about that world, because some people I imagine are very interested in it, but may not know that much about it.
Yeah, sure. We're just like living this what we call the psychedelic renaissance in a way.
Exactly.
Mm. And also just like getting back to the later question, this which connects also with what's happening with the psychedelic field, but this sense of community or the integration part, which is after you have an experience or a learning or you learn focusing or you have a psychedelic experience in a therapy assisted, um, the most important part of all of that, of course, the experience is important, but is the integration, how you bring that back to your life.
Hmm.
Uh, and it's not, it's really hard if you do it by your own. So if you have, there's even like t-shirts, mottos saying the best thing about psychedelics is not psychedelics, it's the community. So how you create a critical mass afterwards with people that know the same language, and then you get together there. It's what kind of holds everything, and the integration would be like the net and the changes that you can do in your life, of course by yourself, but then the support is fundamental. So
That's interesting because what you've just said there makes me wonder if one of the differences between people that kind of link more to the community, as you're saying, and people that kind of disappear from view, maybe part of the difference is that the people that do take focusing as something for their lives, not just as a clinical sort of method or something to integrate into their work, but people that seriously integrate it into their lives, maybe they're more likely to seek the community.
Yeah, absolutely. It opens more,
Yeah,
and also you receive more also because
exactly.
the other will come with you and will intervene and link.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're not lonely on that path in a way.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this was all very recent. I think focusing in psychedelic-assisted therapy, Greg, are just made for each other. How this can sound. Um, and also is not very well known in the psychedelic community yet. But I honestly believe it can have a purpose. Also scared because sometimes there are things that are good that they keep a little bit hidden because the world can really colonize things and totally transform them, make it into a capitalist view. So there's also that danger. The same happens with us as persons and as being in the world. We might lose track with what is essential. But all the work of Gendling and all the trainings I kind of had as I'm working in this area, I was just, with other names, I was just seeing everything and uh, in common
Hmm.
with Jean's work. Um, I um, I I was always personally really afraid of this substances. We would call it drugs. That's also a conceptual way. And now we kind of should not talk about drugs. They're substances in a way because the science has shown like they don't have, if used responsibly and in the right context, with the right preparation, they don't create a toxicity in your body, neither dependence,
Hmm.
generally speaking. So this makes them have, a different name than what we associate with drugs in a way. But for me, growing up, that was all the same, of course. And my mother was a doctor, and the conversations about the problems, and Portugal had a really big crisis also with heroin, which then changed into progressive policy regarding drugs and helped a lot to take off a lot of criminalization, health issues. Um, but I had my own stories. I remember a person that was I was barely a teenager, my friends, and I remember there was a person around the garden where we'd stay, and he would come very slowly and rubbing his hands and asking for a cigarette. And the story about that person was like, oh, before he graduated, he went to this party and he took some MDMA and he fried his brain. So
Hmm.
we don't know if these things are true or not, but the way some stories stayed in all of us, sometimes are there in the paths that we take. And only in 2014, I was in my training. I was practicing my transpersonal psychology and existential psychotherapy. I had an old friend from my transpersonal times, which was the first ones, and he was the most ethical, sensible, care person about our emotional safety, the way we do therapy. He's even coordinating trainings in this area. And we were very familiar with modified states of consciousness. It's part of our own training and personal processes too. And he invited me to go to this private ceremony in his house. He was not going to be there, but his wife was going to participate. Was going to come a Argentinian shaman, and there was very tailored and selected people that were going to be there, 9 or 10 people. And he was offering the beverage ayahuasca.
Hmm.
And if it was not this friend, Greg, I think I would probably not be here talking about this, because it had to be him to take all the fears I had about it. I would go on modified system of consciousness kind of works and processes and therapies, but not with substances, not with drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But since it was him, this gave me the trust to go, and that was my first encounter with the psychedelic state. I remember those, like, spending the whole ceremony. My hand was like drumming in my heart all the time without stopping, and I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. That was the feeling, and I
Mm-hmm.
just let my whole body just process the experience as it could. I was having also a lot of visuals about you know little atoms that create structures, and with the sound and the drumming, they would disperse and open up and reshape and reform. So I was learning something. But this state has a way to focus my attention, to bring it to the heart as a as another center of perception, as an inner center of perception and knowledge and wisdom, and that goes beyond culture, that goes beyond your watchtower, that goes beyond your mental and cognitive, conceptual rules, whatever, all of that. You know, that was the biggest lesson for me, and from then on, I changed a lot of ways in my way of being, and got back to nature and to hiking and going in contact, and my whole cells kind of opened up again. Yeah, I knew focusing already there.
Yeah.
So it was, I would say, like almost like focusing on steroids, if you
Mm-hmm.
want. It's different. It's not so gentle as focusing in a way, because you just dive into this experiential realm, and you cannot really stop it when the substance comes inside. I mean, there are ways to stop it, but when the substance comes inside, it's like an airplane. You get on the lift. If you don't like, you have to hold on to what it, or if you're not prepared. But the airplane is only going to land when it's going to land. And with focusing in other experiential processes that are natural, you can stop the process right there. But this was overwhelming, surprising, and I started then to know more there. And
Can I just say that I mean, I'm really appreciating hearing your experiences and how you kind of initially got into this, but I'm also curious if you've just said something that um, might be quite uh, kind of fundamental, is that when you take at least most of these substances, in my experience at least, when you take them, there is a kind of handing over or giving in. It's kind of like, okay, whatever happens, I'm on board because I can't just jump. I'll have to wait for this to land. And until then, I'm in your hands, so to speak. And if there's something about that that is, as you were saying, kind of almost heart opening or something, that it does require, at least if you have a good experience, maybe if you have a bad experience, it's because you resist this, but it requires kind of that kind of emotional trust.
yeah, um, absolutely. And this is one thing which sometimes can be a little bit unethical in terms of some studies that happened with psychedelics, which is people never had an experience of a modified state of consciousness, or to connect to their felt sense, for example, or some of them never done therapy, uh, or some have done therapy but only on a talk therapy in a way. So if this was an ideal world, it would really, really be important for the person to open up those emotional processes, connect to felt sense, to the implicit wisdom of the body, different layers of your your awareness and consciousness and build up a trust first before going into something like this. It can be, for some people, it can even be re-traumatizing if the preparation is not done, and if the follow-up also is not done. I was talking about my experience. Luckily, it has always been meaningful. It's like focusing for me. I had the opportunity in my training also, because I made part of a team where we did research on psilocybin, and we were going to do also research on MDMA with PTSD. But that study the last part didn't happen. But I got the privilege of having both experiences. They invited the investigators and the therapists, like when you're doing any kind of training in therapy, also it's important to do your own personal process. So they invited me to have experience with psilocybin in a clinical context, and then 1 year afterwards, I had the experience with MDMA. So I had all this training, not only in transpersonal psychology, but also with focusing, and it kind of, say, brings you more proficiency in how to navigate this. Imagining myself without any training and just going straight through something this could be very scary. So it's really important that people are really prepared to know what they're going to go through, full emotional trust and full in a way trust also in the person that's there with you, that's going to be with you traveling through those experiences. So what we call the setting in a way.
Well, the first person that got you into this was somebody that you've described as you really trusted that person, and that's why you were there trying the ayahuasca. I'm curious about, for you, what would you say is the difference between the psilocybin and the MDMA? Did they have quite a different impact for you, or?
I'm remembering your first questions, but we're going down in the circle of waste. It's also my or spiral. This is kind of my generally we have like this, what we call the classic psychedelics or typicals or major psychedelics, which are psilocybin, which is the active substance of magic mushrooms, so it's more known. LSD, which comes from sort of a fungus of I forgot it in English, with something you make the bread with, and you have mescaline that comes from a cactus, and you have DNT, which you can find in the ayahuasca beverage, but also in the toad, and you also have ibogaine. Normally not mentioned, but ibogaine is like this African plant root that's also been used. So we will call this, also you can even call them entheogens, which it's like entheogens means like manifesting the divine within. And these are things that you can find in nature that are prepared long ago. You can have anthropological records of mushrooms and mushroom head statues that date like 5,000 years ago in Guatemala, and they kind of spread all over, mainly mushrooms, because they are much more adaptable to the environment than other things. And these were the ones that were used for research, mescaline and LSD, and then psilocybin, most of it. And then we have what we call the atypical psychedelics. All of them, in a way, I would say they have a different signature, different experiential signature. And with this, you will join the variability of each person and its own awareness and embodiment and existential issues altogether. So it's a complicated equation of how much things are there, but they do have different signatures. And with the typical ones, we have MDMA or MDA2 we call these empathogens and entactogens. Entacto is like inner, tactus is inner touch,
Mhm.
and empathogens is like MDMA has this ability to create self-compassion, compassion for others. It's also named as medicine of the heart. It kind of takes your amygdala, which is part of the brain that's hypervigilant, protecting you, like maybe where the inner critic might live in a way.
Just what I'm thinking, yeah.
Yeah. So he's always worried about the external things, what's dangerous for you, how to behave and position the right way. It turns that off, and it allows that your emotional and embodied world and your biographical world or cognitive world too, they kind of flow in a very intuitive embodied thing. It's so it's very particular for me, the work with MDMA. It's existentially and in terms of psychotherapy, it's incredible, because while the other ones, the major ones, can like the flower of your consciousness or bring you into mystical experiences or deeply into also bad trips and deeply into issues of your life, but they might like create this sort of mystical experiences somehow. MDMA can also bring that, but it kind of just dives you deeply into yourself, into the existential and your biographical, the things you have been carrying, specific things you lived in your life. It just dives you deeper into this intuitive embodied knowledge. It's almost like a therapist comes inside and just starts to probing and taking you to the places that are needed to be acknowledged and lived. Also, ketamine fits here in the typical psychedelics, and it's an anesthetic.
Yeah, anesthetic.
Anesthetic, yeah. And ketamine, politically and socially, and in terms of primary health systems, has a great advantage towards the other ones because it has been approved as a anesthetic. It's one of the hundreds more safe medications that we have. It's used in children, it's used in animals, it's used for surgeries and the ambulances. So it has all the science done behind it, and it's legal. So now ketamine is being used in what is called off-label. Yeah. So that was not its main purpose, that the whole system allowed it to have a voice in a place. It's been using off-label, things in the War of Korea. They find out that people that were the soldiers that were treated with ketamine, compared to the soldiers that were treated with opioids, the ketamine ones had less symptoms of PTSD and anxiety and depression compared. So they went and followed this thread, and then understood that they have also antidepressant and anxiogenic
interesting
effects.
Yeah.
So now it's available to be used, and there are a lot of ketamine clinics like spreading in the world in a way to provide this for people, mostly with treatment-resistant depression. All of the other substances are still illegal. They cannot be used only in studies, except now MDMA is being used in Australia. It can be prescribed now in Australia as a compassionate use. So it's a legal possibility where if you have a substance or drug or medication that's being studied and already thoroughly studied, but it's still not approved, then you can ask your doctor to use it compassionately or expanded access, So yes, they do have different ways. Like MDMA could be much more this losing your fear of relating with others, accessing schemes and issues of trauma, understanding it from a different state of presence where you're not activated by your nervous system, receiving support and help from therapists if that is needed. Ketamine could be something like a sort of meditative substance because it kind of brings you to an experience of like you're being in another body. It's a space medicine, if you would call, like you kind of lose your form and you kind of awareness, or that sense of William James about awareness being like a water that kind of adapts to the form and the vehicle, the context where it is. Ketamine kind of does this. It takes you off this rumination thinking or holes of depression where you are, and it's like almost like you'd be floating. Your mind is in a different place, and your body seems to be in a different place too. And that opens different windows. So this would be like a different signature from one and from the other, MDMA and ketamine.
I was involved in some ketamine therapy in the early 90s in Ireland. And so I resonate with some of what you're saying about ketamine. For me, it depended an awful lot because, like you were saying, in order to be therapists in the project, we had to try it ourselves. So we had to see what the clients would be going through. And for me, my experience depended an awful lot on the dose.
Oh, yes.
Because we started in our project, which was in a psychiatric hospital, we started giving very big doses at first. And then we started to find that the smaller doses seemed more therapeutic in our project. So I'm curious if you found the same thing, that the dose has an impact on your experience, or if you found that different doses are more useful, or...
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Not only my personal experience, but also the protocols that now are available for people, either in studies or either in the off-label use. There's also this concept of the importance of substance, set, and setting in psychotherapy. So in substance, you would include what is the specific medicine that you're using. Can I use the word medicine? MDMA is going to try to be approved as a medicine, and it's quite close now. It's really close. But you have all these different layers. Maybe in an ideal future, you can tailor which could be the one for the person's specific situation. How can you use it? Or then swap it to another one when it gets to certain objectives of therapy too. It's interesting to think about the possibilities that the future will bring. The off-label use of ketamine can allow you to tailor a little bit how many dosing you do. But when you're doing research and then clinical research, you only have specific amount of dosage, maybe sometimes only one. And sometimes you might be in a study where it's random and you might have a sort of placebo and another one that's active. In MDMA, you may have 2, sometimes 3 dosing sessions, but no more, because that is the structure where the study is done in a way. So substance, it's there, and the dose. So all the protocols are very specific about it. There's a specific dosing for MDMA, and then you can use a booster afterwards that will not intensify, but will just prolong more the effect in a way. The studies with psilocybin, they've been doing like with 0.1 milligram, which is like basically a placebo, then 10 milligrams, which is a mild one, and then 25 milligrams, which is considered the one that can create mystical experiences or much more meaningful
Yeah.
openness on the effect of this on your awareness. Ketamine also starts, there's a specific small dose, which is enough to have effects. Sometimes some people don't respond to it, but then you can augment that to a certain point, but no more, or else either in ketamine as in any other dose, or even if you're not speaking about substances, even when you're doing focusing, if you spend 1 hour doing focusing and your partnership is listening to you, like, it might be too much information for you to process. And getting back to the substance, and if doses would be too high, then it's almost like there's no one there to process.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I know this creates some dissolution of ego, for example, transcendence of time and space, but there has to be a slight thread towards something that's deserving.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking as I'm listening to you, that it's a little bit like being able to kind of be in presence to parts of you. You have, in some way, you have to be there. There has to be some kind of consciousness or awareness of your experience. If the awareness itself has been blasted away by the dosage, then I guess it's a question of how much can be integrated afterwards.
Exactly. So the just enough, if you're not there to process, people might say, okay, maybe in a subconscious level that's being processed, but it's just too much somehow.
Yeah. So,
But the too much, for example, in psilocybin or with LSD, uh, it's always at a certain point. If you do put more dosage, then you start to go into this more, even more dispersed and not having something to process or to bring somehow.
can I just ask, are you offering kind of focusing oriented integration sessions for people afterwards?
Yes, but unofficially, I would say.
Yeah.
Like,
You're sneaking in the focusing.
exactly, just it's there, and how I listen to the person,
Exactly.
what she says about what she's feeling, or what she says about what she lived in the ketamine experience, for example.
Mhm.
So all of focusing is there without people knowing.
So,
That has been the way I've been working until now, and I hope we'll see if something can be offered, a
yeah.
part of training, not only for therapists but also for people, and mostly in their preparation.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mm. Can
we
I
act,
just,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to ask the people that you do meet with for like integration sessions after they've had an experience. Do you notice in terms of focusing, do you notice anything particular about them? Like, are they more able to get in touch with their body or more able to stay with experience? Or is there anything general like that that you're starting to realize?
Absolutely, Greg. Not only by my personal experience, but even in uh, I'm always talking about research, and it was hard for me to go to the empirical research, but some of the things are important, very important, and they create um, democracy in how we use it, and a ground too. And there's this thing called like the critical period or critical moment. Uh, Maybe in a general time we might call it the afterglow, for example, of a psychedelic experience, either in therapy in a clinical context or recreationally. But something stays in you. There's this level of plasticity that you have that has been identified in the brain. So neurogenesis, and you're in very plastic and in a great moment to create new attitudes and behaviors. And the experience itself not only opens people to their interiority in the way some of them never experience. And that is very helpful. And in our clinic, we really ask for people to continue or start a process of therapy after this, because it just opens a door. And then you need to take care of that door. The main sessions we have like are preparation sessions, dosing session, and then 1 or 2 days, or maybe the next week, not more than that, you have the integration session. So there's this period where you really notice people are still connected to the experience, to the emotion that came, to the wonder, to the struggle, to all the contexts that appear, and you see a different way in their reasoning about things, their narratives about things, compared to the preparation session when they arrive and when you meet them. Like there's this sort of a little pause, and then suddenly your brain, your worldview just got a little bit or cracked or opened, and you're trying to make a new sense of that. That's where you kind help to bring this new possibility, and sometimes a new hope, a new perspective of looking at things, a new ability that you might have inside that you never knew. And they are very plastic in that sense.
Is that, can I just ask, is that, if you were to say it very simply, is that kind of the most common impact that you find, is that after these psychedelic sessions or whatever sessions, that the impact for, maybe a week or two after at least, is that there's this period of time where there's more space. The person is more able to be with aspects of their process rather than be so close to it that they can't really process it.
Okay, like so close, like when they're in the dosing, and
Well, I'm thinking, I guess it's a question of how you're, because I imagine you've witnessed enough people go through these processes that you're starting to come up with ideas of kind of how is this helpful or what's really going on. And well, I guess one of the things I'm wondering in focusing terms is if you're finding that the psychedelic experience helps a person have more space so that they can be with their struggles rather than be overcome by them, let's say.
yeah, yeah, the like I would say, like not only you have your experience doing the dosing session, which by itself it's
Yeah.
a thing by itself, new contact, new visions of you, ways of thinking, emotions, but then that moment where you're still not totally composed, it's an incredible window that's opened. That is in fact pivotal. What you're going to do with that in terms of sustainability and consistency, how you're going to bring that back to your life, how you're going to return to the market and buy your vegetables and stuff and go into the world, is also a major thing. And I would say, because this is an experience, okay, it's created by a substance, but the substance is like, they are just like instruments. Alan Watts said something like, if you got the message, hang up the phone, because these are just instruments like telescope and microscope. The biologist doesn't spend his whole life looking into the microscope. He just goes out into the world and works on what he has seen. But the fact that we have an experience, it's a subjective experience, um, it creates memory too. It's lived. So that is the memory of that can be the medication, can be the antidepressant that you take. You remember the new meanings that came, for example, or you remember that you can answer something in a different way. So you live that in the dosing session, for example, and you kind of pick those things up in the critical moment in the integration. And every time you have a struggling or challenging situation in your life, the memory, the fact that you had a subjective experience of it, it's there to be invocated. It's there to alter your chemistry. It's to alter your way of thinking or answering. This doesn't happen with medication. It just takes something to balance your chemistry in the brain and feel good and go back to function.
So let me say that back to you, because that sounds really important to me. That one of the things that really is maybe special, unique, or at least very impactful about this way of working is that it gives the individual like a body memory, an actual experience that they can take with them. And especially in this kind of the afterglow where you might be doing some of the integration, you can kind of maybe sort of solidify that in a way that they really become consciously aware of it. So when they go back into their everyday life and things become difficult again, they can remember that they actually had this experience of openness or oneness or love or self-compassion or whatever it was. That having had that experience, it gives them some resource to carry with them into their life afterwards.
Absolutely. I was going to add, and also suffering. Sometimes I'm afraid I'm being too enthusiastic or passing a romanticized, but this is like you dive into a cosmic soup of your living. It has everything. It has everything. But you do go with something that's that can help you to find healing, to find new meanings. And takes you out of your own narrative or temporary line, and you just discover stuff that you didn't learn in your family and in your school, and that it's inside. There's this you can have the potentiality to understand that there's a inner GPS, so this just the majesty of a majestic knowledge of our bodies and how he holds and remembers stuff that you somehow in your worldview, if you want, you were not aware. And so
you get to access something that's much more expansive than just socialization.
or even like what you were getting up from therapy also. It can in fact just open, because it's this, when you do a scan, and even when you're in a psychedelic state and do a scan to your brain, they have compared the normal brain and the brain on psychedelics, and it's like you have in the normal brain you have this slightly connections between the visual and the motor area, and then the emotional part and the memory, like the old phones with the line. And when you see the brain on psychedelics, it's like optical fiber, like everything that's not in connection is like a city of information, all that normally doesn't connect when you're in a normal state, then comes up into your awareness temporarily. So
it turns on all the lights at once.
Like you want to see it depending on your own reference, all your chakras are open up, the flower of your awareness is totally open. The cognitive, the emotional, the embodied, the behavioral, the environment, all of that, you're just you don't have a strong structure to filter those things, but it's very permeable. So
can I ask, just because you're using different terms there, And I want to get to something that I'm not exactly sure how to get to, but one way maybe is to ask this question. Having had these experiences and having worked with other people going through these experiences, has it had any impact on your own thinking, kind of what life is, what a human person is, what the body is, what therapeutic process is, anything like that? Has it had an impact on you in that way?
That's a beautiful question. So personal and also intimate, but it's the core. It's the core.
Yeah.
I think there's this sense of owning certain feelings and perceptions that I had as a kid, and I never found a place where they would be seen, where they would be held. And the the ownership of your feelings, of what is behind culture, what is behind your own personality, what is behind family, what is behind transgenerational trauma that we all carry. They kind of opened me to an experience where I could sense, I don't know, almost like the full potential of my being could come in and inside my body and tuned. Just it was like, okay, if you water a plant with the sun, the water, put it in the right place, how can it grow? It's impossible for us to not live in history and not have the legacies of our ancestors. It's always there, but it's opening up to the full potentiality and deeply questioning the things that we were taught, but in a good way, questioning to open them. And I would say, what now it's really settled here is, besides having a body, being a human, being part of Earth, being in my existence in a limited time, I'm also we are also, because I'm not talking about me, I think how I see people, I see myself, but of course how I see the world. We are part of a larger, much larger thing. We are part of cosmos. We have a cosmic nature, and we are afraid of speaking. We have, but the Earth is around the sun because there's solar system. There's systems around that allow life to be present in such a huge space here. Allow us to have what is a miracle, and you don't think about it, you really feel it. It's a miracle if you take in consideration the time and space of the whole universe, and the probability of you having a conscious experience, a conscious embodied experience right here with you, with others. It's much more rare than gaining the lottery in terms of probabilistically. So there's something that has been giving much more ownership inside of me. I would say that would be the major course. The humbleness and how much you have gathered as a person, and knowledge and what you have built up in your own reference as a person. But then there's something else, either your body, either the environment, either nature, either earth, either whatever. There's a spiritual thing, there's a beyond thing that's also supporting your life, and you're in connection with that. And
so let me say that back to you so that you can correct me. That what you have found is this ownership of yourself, and that this self is not separate, actually, but is part of a whole cosmic system that includes you. Is that much correct?
yeah, holds everything, includes everything. It's around.
Yeah, it's around
everyone, in my view.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm curious if it then, having discovered that, or had a tangible experiences of that, and understood it in the way that you have so far, at least, has it had an impact on how you understand focusing?
It's like focusing knows that.
Yeah.
The felt sense knows that. The felt sense is like, oh, okay, yes, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
I would be more shy in terms of speaking out for biospirituality, or the way the environment, or the way you can be sensible to environment, and how environment can touch you, communicate with you, or if you're in a specific state of presence with your felt sense,
Mhm.
and you're interacting with a plant,
Mhm.
you might feel really what Gentling was talking about. There's a being there. There's something that's, if you put yourself in a receptive state and present there, instead of searching for or trying to bring meaning to something in that interaction, what can come from there? That's can be much more wide too.
Mhm.
So um,
I want to just say, I love the way you say that the felt sense knows that. It's like the felt sense already knows that it's not separate from the whole system, the whole thing.
yeah, yeah. I would say even um, of course it might depend of how you feel things and interact in your own structure, but um, many of my focusing experiences been, in the realm, what is a psychedelic experience too? Absolutely,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
focusing, but it is.
Mhm.
I, I, I don't know. I remember having an experience of focusing where suddenly I was connected to the felt sense, the clearing the space issue, and you stop trying to find things. It's just like fully present, and uh, you see how your cells are interacting with the environment and the bird,
Mhm.
and suddenly I kind of felt like by doing that, I felt like I was a little pore on the skin of the earth, and I was opening something to breathe and to exchange
Mhm.
while was cars passing by and
Mhm.
noise, and like so I felt that in my body, and I kind of felt like the environment around me was thanking me. I don't really care if this is really happening in the sense of it can be proved, but this is the experience that
Yeah.
can be got, and this just changes your chemistry and your notion of connection, and with yourself and with what's around. Um, so
That the universe breathes itself through you.
yeah, good. And it can even sound maniac or something like that, or messianic, but no, the experience is like that, is that kind of thing. Uh, or um, I remember, for example, having my psilocybin experience in a clinical context, and one of the things that came up was like this. Sometimes people have the experience of your father or mother putting you in your lap and letting you drive the car, while you put your hands in the car and you go, and I think, oh, I'm driving the car. But it's controlling everything underneath it. I had the same kind of experience. I did connect to that experience as a lived one during the psilocybin experience. But the way it was lived was like, so now you're gonna sit down in the lap of this sort of Shiva, or like some sort of what people call a god or an entity or something, whatever. And you'll sit down and you're writing the creativity of the forces of the whole life and universe by itself in micro and macro levels. So this is what I can put into words, Greg.
Mhm.
And I remember something coming up, uh, which was like, I'm writing the cosmic horses of eternal blissful creation. This I could not pick up in a normal state. So
Yeah.
there was like, so it really opens you to wonder and to awe again. Maybe in a way, your they call the default mode network. There's really, as your own personality, really inside your brain, you have like this structured links
Mhm.
because of memory, because of habits, because language, and there's even like a core center inside, from which you look into the world, and with psychedelics that gets shattered like a snowball.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be something like, as an adult, in a way, you're living again in the brain of a child, somehow kind of in immediacy and connection to things and feeling them. That could be one of the ways of explaining how what this can do sometimes.
And I'd like to just, I mean, I resonate with a lot of what you've said, and you're right, it leads to spectacular language. But it's difficult to put into language because it's actual experience.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, this is a much more mundane question, but I'm wondering if the opening up, if I could call it that you've experienced by doing this work and by focusing, if it has an impact, and I don't mean an impact in that you might guide clients to notice their bodies more, but I'm wondering about the clinical impact when you're working with other people, if almost the cosmic context that you're more tangibly aware of, if that ever comes into sessions with other people, or if it's has any impact on your way of working with other people, even if they're talking about like not getting along with their boss at work or something.
A lot of that stuff can actually just be the background and very far away from there, for sure. But I think if the person comes up with something that's weird, that's on that context, the acknowledgement and the way I respond explicitly or implicitly, I think allows it more to be there. But just we like in focusing or existential therapy, we don't impose nothing of these things, but um, um, I I think not having these sort of experiences there, I might miss a lot of things from the client's experience. I think that's
So let me say that back to you. That if a client comes with something that might be a little bit unusual, they can sense from you that you're open to it. It doesn't scare you. You're not going to try to clamp down on it or something. You actually would welcome any of these slightly unusual experiences that clients might have, and you would notice them, even if they're not making much of it. But the other thing, I'm wondering if you don't also sit with, this might be an odd way to say it, but sit with a slightly different body, having experienced what you've experienced, so that even if the person is talking about a fight with their boss, you have maybe a slightly different perspective in the way that you hear that, that you maybe hear it and receive it in a more spacious way, and that might make some kind of a difference to the client, even if your response is just to stay with their content, the way they're presenting it, that somehow your bodily processing of it is a little bit more expansive or something.
you know and, let's say yeah, definitely. Like when you brought that back, where I went to was kind of even the mundane things. I think that they are seen and felt and received with as much reverence
Yeah.
as cosmical ones. Absolutely,
Yeah.
it's yeah. The both are are there. It's really weird how to navigate
Yeah.
the expansion and the spectrum of it. But I was like, from mundane to little things, like it's sorry, I think the level of presence and the level of attention, Greg, that what you're able to notice when you're with someone, it is expanded.
Yeah.
It is expanded, and also in this mundane fight with the boss, if you're with that body, with that presence, other um, connections and avenues can help them out to unfold, definitely.
And that word reverence is the same word that was kind of in my mind when you said it. I'm just conscious of time. I feel like it might be a little bit frustrating to other people because we touched on so many things that require an hour at least of further discussion. But this is a nice introduction. I really enjoyed it. But before we finish, I just want to ask you if there's anything left for you that you would like to say, anything that we didn't quite finish, or any other aspect of your work that you're particularly passionate about and would like to mention?
Sorry, I'm coughing. I maybe regarding still this place, so the psychedelic-assisted therapy. I think it might be good just to mention, if people want to start somewhere, about looking at a book or some reference. There's this book from Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind. There's a lot of books, but this is more mainstream. Is a reporter connected to food, nutrition, coffee. Is a scientific reporter in a way, and he opened up a project to by himself explore these substances. So he then reports what it was, who he was as a person, and what these substances brought, and then all the scientific and psychedelic renaissance. So it's a good book, How to Change Your Mind. You can find it anywhere. It even got into a Netflix series.
Yeah.
That's one good. There are others, but that can open a lot of doors as a reference. Also, we have a very interesting paper on focusing in psychedelics, which was written by Alicia Danford. She's connected to MAPS and MDMA therapy. She even has done studies with autism and MDMA, or social anxiety and MDMA. But she wrote a piece, it's a small piece in the Journal of Transpersonal Psychology, called something like Focusing as a Supplement for Preparation of Psychedelic-assisted Therapy. So for our folks also, might be interesting to go there.
Yeah.
And she kind of presents focusing in a way, and then gives an idea, an interesting idea, like a felt sense idea. Now we can go into details afterwards. Maybe it's worth it, of how they mingle together, interpersonal, and transpersonal too. So she kind of puts these three. We could even add the social and political and economical, because one of the issues that's it's money and investment, and science also is based on investment. So investors will want to search one thing or the whole spectrum, not everything. Things that are sustainable, like focusing, for example, you cannot patent them, so they're not that interesting for the market. So, but focusing has this sustainability, mostly with partnerships too, and with psychedelic assisted therapy, it's very expensive. 2 therapists, for example, all of the personal resources, hospital resources, and the money it costs, and trying to put this in the system in a way that can be accessible to anyone that needs it. But then integration afterwards and therapy afterwards also has costs. So if something like focusing can come here, as a regulation, self-regulation thing or contemplative thing, and you can do it with another person, so it's sustainable.
Yeah.
And besides being sustainable, Greg, it connects you to another person still. It's interpersonal. So the society and the community the possibility is still there.
Yeah.
So this is another thing that can craft by looking. It's all there. It's all there. But, so I'm very excited about this. I'm talking to people and anyone that's interested. I don't know how to create a structure and plan strategically. That's sometimes one of my failures, but the openness and the welcoming is there to gather people that might feel interest and to maybe create something substantial connected to this and help this. And I'm just saying that my whole professional life and work, weirdly, the things that I have been doing, and sometimes I felt we're a bit lost where I was going. All of now is making sense in the psychedelic territory. It has a way to hold everything somehow.
It shines a light on your path so that you can see it more clearly.
Yeah. And definitely, again, it's not the substance, but what it opens to, and it opens to our felt sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Opens to a knowledge and implicit knowledge that we have here, that has been here for thousands of years, and has found its way to survive in this planet, and it has a wisdom. And us, that is something that's part of my vision and my passion. Is this door needs to be looked upon and taught. So everything that guides us to there is kind of my passion.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. I will I'll put some kind of a link so that people can find you and perhaps join with you in this sort of exciting adventure. And if possible, if we could find the Danford paper, maybe I could put a link to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give them all those links back to you.
Okay.
You can do that.
Yeah. Terrific. Thank you very much. It's been absolutely fascinating and makes me want to know more.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Greg. It was great to be here with you, and sorry that we cannot fit everything in 1 hour, but
well, we might have to have a part 2.
Yeah, more integration.
Yeah, more integration. Yeah. Thanks very much, João.
Bye, Greg.
Yeah,
Thank
bye.
you.